Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Visual Mind podcast. Today, I feel a little bit more talkative than usual, so I thought, why not record another podcast episode? I think something that I would really love to talk about here on the podcast is why you should create ugly art. This is something that I have been thinking about a lot, and I don't know yet because I'm recording this before editing the whole thing together, obviously. I am recording the audio first. I don't know yet what kinds of visuals I will add to this video, but you will see the process of some type of art piece or multiple art pieces while I am talking. I'm not sure yet if I want to pick something that I personally think is ugly or if I want to pick something that I personally think looks good. I might do either way and just not tell you what I think about the pieces that I pick, because then you can kind of speculate on that, because it honestly doesn't matter. I'm just gonna pick something that is long enough or makes sense time-wise with the podcast, just so you know that it might be footage of something that looks really good, even though I am talking about making ugly art. I just don't want you to look at something that is really, really ugly for an extended amount of time. And I will also explain to you why that is, why I am not sharing the ugliest of art with you. So I want to talk a little bit about balance, basically. So I personally think that you have to make bad art in order to make really, really good art that you actually love. So something that I have personally struggled with is, especially when I quit my full-time job and then later on also my part-time job, when I moved into my business and did it really full-time and professionally, something in my mind just shifted and told me that now I have to be a quote-unquote good artist. And I felt like now I really had a lot of pressure that I created myself mostly. And I sort of looked at every single piece that I created through the lens of, is that good enough for a professional artist, to call myself a professional artist? And that completely sucked all of the joy and fun out of it for me. And that was slowly over a longer period of time, like 2 to 3 years. So it happened very gradually. And it's definitely a lesson that I have learned now. And what I did now is that I started an ugly sketchbook. This is something that I really call my ugly sketchbook. That does not mean that everything in the sketchbook is ugly. It just means that it can be. And I'm calling it that so that I purposely know that when there is an ugly page in there, I will think to myself, oh yeah, that's the whole goal. That's the whole reason that I'm doing this sketchbook, is to make ugly art. And also, I'm not sharing my ugly sketchbook here or in any other video, because the point for me is to do it without any pressure and to do it just for myself. So my ugly sketchbook is a place where I will just sit down and doodle whatever comes to mind when I feel like it or when I'm looking for ideas. So if I have a specific project in mind, for example, I want to paint a greenhouse, I can maybe show a few snippets here, but I won't show the entire sketchbook. When I want to do a greenhouse, I will do those very loose sketches, and then I can turn it into something prettier in my prettier sketchbooks. So I might use it for something like that where I already have an idea, or I might use it just to doodle. And also, I'm showing some things sometimes of my ugly sketchbook. I show more of it in my online art membership, the Cozy Creators Collective, and I don't show as much outside of that, just here and there. but I pick and choose what I want to show. I don't have to show the ugliest pages. And for me personally, as a creator, where I already show so much of my art, it is really nice to have a place where I know that I don't have to share this afterwards. It's just for me. If I want to and if it makes sense, I might share specific pages, but I don't have to share the entire sketchbook. I also don't have to fill it in a certain amount of time. I don't have to make it look good. This could be the ugliest thing ever. And honestly, I love doing that because sometimes I do something really ugly. I might actually show an example here. Do something really ugly, and then it gives me an idea for something finished. For example, the piece that I did with the cities and the trees, I did the ugly one in a bonus session actually at the end of my most recent art course. And then I thought, why not use this idea? And I did it in the first art class of the Cozy Creators Collective. I turned it into a finished piece. So I had something really ugly, but I thought, okay, there's an idea here. It doesn't have to look good. And honestly, I found that this is the best catalyst that I've had for finding new ideas, to have a space where I allow myself to make really, really ugly stuff. And then some of that stuff really is nice and is usable. And I will just do the roughest sketches in there. And that's one part of the whole you have to make ugly art thing. It's not the only thing that I have going on that I want to talk about, but having this sketchbook has really helped me just to find ideas, to unwind, to just doodle, to let myself do the ugly stuff. And I also don't have a rigid schedule to work in this sketchbook. I've had it for several months, and the one that I use is extremely cheap. I think I bought it for less than €2 at a local store. It's called Action. I don't know if you live in Germany or Austria, you will probably have these stores. They have these really, really cheap art supplies, craft supplies, all types of stuff. It's probably similar to a dollar store in the US, or I think something similar is in other countries as well. So these types of stores might have a sketchbook. I recommend something that doesn't have completely paper thin, like really, really thin paper that's like printer paper, not something where you can see everything through. So it has to have at least a little bit of quality, so you still want to work in it, but not too good, not too expensive. It has to be at a range where you still feel comfortable ruining it. And also something that makes me think about right now is what actually got me back into art. I don't think I've ever talked about that, was actually the Rectus journal book. I don't know if any of you remember it. It was huge on YouTube in, I think, 2016, 17, around that time. Back then, a lot of artists were discovering that book. The book was around for a while already back then, but I think that was the time. It was also when I was in college, when artists were discovering that book, and they were really casually doing it, but making it look cute, because the whole purpose of the Rectus journal book is obviously to destroy the book. But there's a lot of prompts in there that can be interpreted in an artsy way. So a lot of people were doing things in there that were actually kind of pretty, but the pressure was really low because the whole point was to make it look ugly and broken. So if it was anything other than completely broken, if it had any colors in it, it was already better than what it was intended to be. So the bar was really low. It was a lot easier, I believe, to create something in there and be happy with the result. And I also started doing one. I never finished it because it has so many pages and it got really thick, but I did do a lot of pages in there. And it really got me going again and got me back into art, actually. And I think that was a big catalyst for me to do it in a way that doesn't have as much pressure, because I did draw a lot when I was a child. I did do nothing else. I loved drawing, especially before I started school. So in kindergarten, when I was like 3 to 6 years old, and then still in school, I really liked it until I was maybe, let's say, 15 or something, was when I probably didn't do as much anymore. Then I found photography as a hobby when I was around 16. And I don't think that I drew a lot then. I know I didn't draw a lot. I maybe drew a piece a year or something like that. So really not very creative in that aspect. And I didn't find my way back to that until I was in my early 20s. And that was actually through the Rectus journal that I started to create art again. And I also did a lot of collages and art journaling, where I also wrote like in a diary. And that was really the beginning of it all, because it was such a low pressure way of doing it. And I think that that really helped me to get into it. And that also then started me painting in sketchbooks and filling sketchbooks. I really liked the idea of art journals and sketchbooks, because you don't always have this, you don't always have to make it look finished. You don't have the intention of creating a masterpiece in a sketchbook that you want to hang on the wall, because you can't really. I mean, you can tear it out or you can make a copy and hang that up, but usually you don't have the intention of creating a masterpiece. A sketchbook is more the place to play around. And I really liked the idea of finishing them quickly, so I didn't have to get too much into my head about it, and I didn't have to think about it too much. And just when I was done with the page, I would just flip to the next page and just create, and it didn't have to be good. So I think that was a real factor in me becoming a lot more creative again. And I just thought about that, and I think it really fits with this topic. So that's kind of the low pressure sketchbook that I would really recommend every artist do. Like I said, I don't have a rigid schedule. I don't sketch in it every single day. There's times where I sketch in it multiple hours a week. And then there's times where I don't look at it for several weeks. It really doesn't matter. Sometimes I remind myself and very gently tell myself I could do more in there, but not in a forceful way. And that's the one thing. Then the other thing that I wanted to talk about is I have my more finished and prettier sketchbooks. Those are the ones that I show in my YouTube videos. Those are the ones that are for content. And I want you to know that I also do other types of sketchbook that are more ugly. It's not just the more finished and pretty and colorful sketchbooks that I do. But for a while I did only do those. So for a long time I didn't have an ugly sketchbook, but a lot of artists I know, they will do the ugly sketches off camera, and I don't think that it can be kind of misleading, because you only see that stuff, and then you are probably at least subconsciously comparing yourself to that, because you're comparing the finished and good art from someone else to your ugly art. So in a way that can be a bit harmful there. But also on the other side, me as a creator, I have to kind of protect my creativity a little bit. And I know that if I showed my ugly sketchbook, it wouldn't be an ugly sketchbook anymore, because then I automatically would have the pressure again, and I would try to make it look at least somewhat good, or have to make every page make somewhat sense. and I wouldn't create as freely in there if I knew there was an audience for it. So I just pick and choose some of the pages in there. Sometimes it's the ugly pages, sometimes it's the ones that aren't as ugly are the ones that I share. But for me, it's almost like a diary. It is something where I think that privacy is a good thing. And if you're not a creator, I still think that having some type of art journal that you don't share with your family and friends, don't share with anyone, you don't post on Instagram, I think it's very beneficial because it's a space that's just for you. There's no judgment there other than your own, and you can learn to keep your own judgment in check a lot more easily when nobody else is watching. So there's the two sides of the coin. I think in one way it's good to show the more unfinished stuff to give people a more realistic picture. But then on the other hand, I also want to have something that is very low pressure and just for me. And I think that creators should have the privacy to do something like that. I hope that can kind of give you a little bit more insight into my thoughts on that, because I have seen people kind of get angry over this topic of artists just sharing their finished and good sketchbooks, but it's not a realistic picture. So I know that some people are upset about that, and I kind of understand that, but I also understand the other side of it. And I hope that that kind of helps you understand it too, as well. But then the other thing is I have my finished sketchbooks, and I create in them pretty regularly for my videos, and the vast majority of the pieces that I create in those sketchbooks, I film for my content. Or even if I don't film the process, it's gonna end up in a sketchbook tour if it is in the same sketchbook. So one way or another, it's gonna be shared online. So I share all of the pages in those sketchbooks, unless I really, really, really hate something and I cover it up, which happens extremely rarely. But even the pages that I personally don't like, because even in my better sketchbooks, there are pieces that I personally am not happy with. There are some where I don't like the colors, or I think that the composition is off and it just wasn't successful. And that's gonna happen. There's no way to avoid that. Even with the multiple sketchbook system where I have my ugly sketchbook, just because I have an ugly sketchbook doesn't mean that the other sketchbooks are my perfect sketchbooks. That's not how it works. Even in the other sketchbooks, there's gonna be stuff that I personally think is ugly. And I say it like that I personally think that it's ugly, because I know that every time I say that a piece of mine is ugly, somebody else thinks, no, that's actually really good. I really like that. So there's always different opinions about art, and you can create something that you think is absolutely atrocious, but some people will really like that and will really appreciate that. I've had art pieces that I really hated, and then the video about them or the post about them got a lot of engagement and people really enjoyed it. So that happens sometimes. There's at least a few people every time that like the art. So I am a bit careful with my wording. I just say that I personally am not 100% happy with it. I don't say that the entire thing is garbage, because saying that the entire thing is garbage is almost insulting to people who maybe dream about creating something like that. They are maybe beginners and they wish they were at the skill level where they could do that. So if I now then go ahead and say this is really shitty and really ugly, then I kind of discredit that. And also then the other thing why I don't say that it is really trash or something is because I appreciate, or at least I'm trying to appreciate, the bad art as well, or the quote unquote bad art. I'm just labeling it as that right now, but I mean, that's very subjective. But the stuff that I think is bad is necessary, because you can't exclusively create good art. I mean, it's just not possible. You might look at some other artist and you might think all of their art pieces are good. Every single one of their art pieces is good. A thought experiment that I've personally been doing, and it doesn't work with every artist, but it works with a lot of them. When I look at somebody else's Instagram page, for example, and I admire all of their art pieces and I think their skill level is impeccable and it's so good. And I then start comparing myself to them and feel like all they do is amazing. First of all, they're not going to post their ugly art. They're probably only posting the stuff that they like. You can't know that for sure. There's no way to tell if they would post their ugly art, the stuff that they think is ugly. You don't know that. Second of all, I look at an art piece that somebody else created that I think is really good. And this might sound really negative, but I look at it and I imagine that I created that. I imagine that I did every single brush stroke in this piece and I look at it really closely, every single brush stroke. Like if you create a piece, you're gonna look at it for probably several hours, depending on the type of art, but you're gonna look at it for an extended amount of time and you're gonna do all of those brush strokes because you did the piece. So I imagine that I did every single one of those layers, every single one of those details, and I really try to immerse myself in this visualization where I am the artist that created this piece that I didn't in reality, but I just imagine that. And then I go ahead and think, so now I've created this piece. What do I think is still missing? What do I think can still be improved? Which parts of the art piece don't I like? And then if I really manage to envision that I am the creator, I find all of the flaws. I find the little strokes that I think are too uniform. They don't look organic enough. Or the colors that don't 100% match. Or the little sketch lines showing through that I don't think look finished enough. Just stuff that I think if I had done this piece and this was my piece now hanging on the wall and I look at it, stuff that I personally wouldn't be 100% happy with. I can find those in most art pieces that other people create. So if I do this thought experiment, I am realizing that I am so much more critical of the art that I create than of other people's. Because usually when I look at other people's art and I don't do this thought experiment, then I will think, awesome piece, look at it for 10 seconds if I really like it. Like 10 seconds is already a lot on social media. And I will like that, think it's awesome. Maybe I will even pin it on Pinterest and I will be done. But if I look at it really closely and from this angle where I am actually looking for flaws, I will find them. I can find them in all pieces, not just my own. And the reason why I find them in my own pieces is because I created them, because I spent multiple hours doing all of those brush strokes. I know exactly where the flaws are because I spent so much time with the piece and because I had this mindset throughout the creative process. The entire time I thought, how can I improve this? How can I make this better? What can I still add? What can I still change? Because that's the process of creating the piece. And just because the piece is finished doesn't mean that that lens that I'm looking at it with doesn't mean that that lens is suddenly gone. I still see the stuff that can still be improved. I just say, okay, now it's finished because I've run out of time or I can't do another layer without ruining it or whatever reason. I just say now it's done. But there's probably still stuff that could look better. Like that's just the reality of it. And that's the case with every single art piece. Nothing in this world, especially art, is ever perfect. And even the master paintings and the master sculptures, if you really spend your time and you look for flaws, you're gonna find something. And it might not be an objective flaw that other people agree with, but it might be something that you don't like about this piece of art. You can most likely find something that you don't 100% like in every single piece, and not just in your own. But the reason why you find it in your own is because you've spent so much time with those pieces already. So this sounds a bit negative to look at all of the flaws, but I think it is refreshing in a way because it adds this perspective that other people's art is not perfect either, and neither is yours. And no art ever has to be perfect. And then when I create something that I think is bad or ugly, if it is in my main sketchbooks and I filmed it for content, most likely I'm gonna post it. It's gonna end in a video, it's gonna end in a sketchbook tour, people are gonna see it. So that's kind of where I played a part of making it realistic in a way, because I showed those pieces as well, even though I'm not 100% happy with them. And they're all part of the journey, and I try to accept that these will be there. And then there's pieces where I can only find very mild flaws. Maybe even pieces where I don't really find flaws. I don't know if I've ever created a single piece that I can't even find a tiny flaw in. Most likely there's gonna be that stuff. But of course, some pieces I'm gonna like a lot more than others. With some, I'm gonna be a lot happier than with others. There is, of course, a range there. And what I'm trying to say is that is part of it. And even the ones that I can find a lot of flaws in, those are important too. And those are part of the process too. And I have to get those out of my system as well. And sometimes with the ones that I really dislike, I learn a lot more and improve my art a lot more than with the ones that I do like. Because I find a lot of things, if I make mistakes, I find a lot of things that I don't want to do again because I know that last time it didn't work. So next time I'm really conscious about how can I improve that. For example, if I picked a color palette where the colors really clashed and I realized, okay, I don't like green and orange together, for example, then next time I'm either consciously not gonna use green and orange, or I'm going to try to create hues and shades of the green and orange that I like together, because maybe if the green was a little bit more teal and the orange was a little bit more yellow, maybe then I would like that combination. So these things can really help inform my other art. And this is why I think they're a really good part of the process. And of course, sometimes the stakes are a lot lower and sometimes they're higher. When I do something in my ugly sketchbook and it's really ugly, it's really not the end of the world because I just did it for myself. But if I have a client and I'm creating content for them and then I don't like it, that's a lot, that can be more uncomfortable for me than if it's just my own art. But even with the art that I create for clients, again, just because I am not happy with it doesn't mean that the client won't like it. So I will still share it with them, give it to them, and just sell it to them as if I like it. And I have never had them then come and say that it's not good enough. I don't think I've ever had that. I've had a situation where I created a tutorial for a brand and they had like minor things that they wanted to change, but that was a bigger thing where we were really talking about what we were doing. So we had it planned. They didn't criticize the finished thing. That was more in the early stages where we then adjusted it a bit to fit more with what they had in mind. I think that was the only time that I got that type of feedback. If you're working as an illustrator and you're doing stuff for print, of course, that's going to be a lot different. You're going to have a lot more feedback. So I think then it's even more important to have the spaces where you figure that stuff out for yourself, the sketchbooks that you don't have to share, where you just play around and experiment. And then when you find something that you like, you pick that and you turn that into the art. And then you can twist it and adjust it until it is something that both you and the client like. So I think then it's even more important to be conscious about that, to have spaces and also spaces in your mind where you allow yourself to say, this is part of the process and this is important. And just because you created an ugly art piece this week doesn't mean that the piece you're creating next week or the pieces that you're creating from now on, that they're also gonna be bad. It doesn't matter that. I mean that. And it doesn't mean that you are a bad artist. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't have to mean anything. It just means that you are creating. And I am talking about all of this because it is really hard to know these things and to remind ourselves of these things. And it's easy to say that, but it's so much harder to follow that. So I want you to know that I struggled with that too. I am not here preaching from above saying, hey, I've fully figured that out and you just have to adjust your mindset and everything will be perfect all the time. That's not it. You will probably be in a process of this all the time, and it is a matter of balance. And sometimes I find that I am getting a bit too critical of myself, and then I take a break, and often I just have to do something else for a bit, eat something, and come back and also push myself to still hit the publish button. Even though I might not be happy with it, it doesn't matter. It's part of the process. And I hope that all of this can help you and help you, motivate you, mostly inspire you, and also make you feel understood, hopefully, because this is something that I think every artist deals with. And I know that some people are way more chill about that and others are way more perfectionistic. So there's a huge spectrum there. But the more you can go into a headspace where you allow yourself to make the ugly art, to have that, to create space for that, the more joy you will have with your art. And sometimes it's really hard to allow yourself to do that. And that's okay too. That's also part of the process. I think that art really reflects our mental health because it is such a personal and vulnerable thing to create. And it is really a reflection of where we are with our own mental health. And if I struggle more with myself and my own head, then I struggle more with my art and with also enjoying the process. And if I am able to let loose more, then I have so much more fun and so much more joy. And also for all of our perfectionists out there, because I know that I need to remind myself of that. Like there's always this voice inside my head when I say, just doodle around, just chill, just let loose, just do this. There's this voice that then says, but I still want to make good art. I still want to get better. I want to improve. I want to put out stuff that I'm proud of. Why can't I do that? And I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm saying let loose, chill, doodle around, have fun. And then, for some mysterious reason, you will create the better art. It will just happen. if you are gentle with your creativity and you focus on the fun of it, you will be motivated to improve your art, and you will be motivated to learn more of the fundamentals, to get more into depth. If you play around more and have more fun, you will create better pieces. That's just gonna happen because you create the ugly art and you experiment and you learn and you allow that and you get through all of that, and then you get so much out of that that you then have the resources to do the more finished art, the stuff that you can then put in your portfolio or hang on the wall. That's the only way you're gonna get there in a sustainable way, where you don't burn yourself out, where you don't start to resent it after a while. Because if you go push, and it has to be good all the time, you're gonna resent the creative process. It's not gonna be fun. I know some people have a really intense work ethic where they can push themselves to do and to have a daily sketchbook session where they just do anatomy and improve and do that. I know people can do that, but that doesn't sound very sustainable and very fun for me. At some point, you're gonna hit a wall and you're gonna ask yourself why you did that if you didn't enjoy the whole part of it, if you didn't enjoy those anatomy practice sessions. If you had a blast doing them, good. But you're gonna need a balance there. Also, you're not gonna enjoy every single brush stroke that you make. Sometimes I have to push myself to finish a piece and to create. That's also part of it. It is a balancing act, but having a lot less pressure is gonna help you. I know it feels extremely counterintuitive, but that's just the way it is with creativity. So I think that's all that I wanted to share for today. This is a bit of a longer one. I hope that it was helpful. Let me know if you're interested in that topic. I'd love to talk more about it. If you have any questions, I'd love to respond to them in future episodes. And I hope I can see you again next time. Goodbye.